So, welcome to another episode of Data River Deep Dive. We are now in London, and I have the honor to have Jovita with me here having a session. Jovita, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, and we finally meet in person.
Exactly. I mean, we were in touch over LinkedIn and then having some sessions. And yeah, Big Data London got us together. So, I'm using the opportunity to sit here with you and have a proper conversation about data and AI. But before we do that,
Okay.
like in every episode, we start with a fun fact about a river. I don't know if I ever told you actually. DRIVA, the company name, the D stands for data, and then
Mm-hmm.
river, like the
Mm.
river. So that's why we always pick a river that is close to the person. And in your case, because you were born in Hong Kong, then you grew up in Toronto, Canada, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
You had some stations in California, I think San Francisco's.
I went to UC Berkeley as one of my stops.
Okay, great, great. Then you were in New York, and now you are kind of living in London.
Yeah, this is my second stretch in London. I
Yeah.
also did my first law degree in London a good number of years back. So this is my second tour in London after being in New York for about 8 years.
Wow, wow. Okay. So I had to I was looking which river should I take and from which city I should take. So I decided for the Humber River from Toronto. Do you know the Humber River? Oh, well, probably you know.
Yeah.
Any special memories about the river?
No, not any special memories. But when we were talking before we started recording, you said that you were
Yeah.
going to share a fun fact about a river. I was
Yeah.
like, which one is he going to pick? I was actually, excited and waiting for it.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, I choose the Humber River. It is 126 kilometer long and it's supplying water or covering around 1 million people. And I chose that river because it kind of starts quietly in the forest and then it goes to farmland and then it passes the city and kind of dense urban areas and so on. And I thought, like, okay, that's actually maybe a good metaphor for our topic because data and AI transformation somehow starts a little bit tiny in a corner, unnoticed, and then like maybe a POC, an MVP, a pilot project at least, yeah. And then people get curious, people want to explore, and then it becomes like a huge topic, and it becomes maybe even something for the bigger company, and yeah, and then it's kind of supplying more than just a small group of people with data, information. And I thought, like, why not sharing this with you? What do you think?
I think that's a great metaphor. And I think in many ways, I think that is one way a journey can be with data and AI.
Yeah.
But as with all rivers, right, it has its own journey, and the journey could look very different for
Mm.
different companies when it comes to data and AI. For some of them, it could start as a small POC in a corner.
Yeah.
For some of them, it could be a major transformation initiative and people want to go in with a bang. I think between you and I, we've seen all
Yes.
sorts of flavors. And I think it's important for us to respect that, right? Instead
Yeah.
of to sit here to say, hey, there's one way to do data and AI transformation,
Mm.
to say, okay, well, what is the context? What is it that we're looking for? What is the purpose? And sometimes you just need to let it, follow the flow.
Exactly. I think that was just perfectly explained by you. And yeah, and we take this now and we jump a little bit into your biography. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So let me look a little bit into my notes. So you are an independent data and AI advisor and attorney in New York as well as in the London region. Is that?
So I guess for me, my journey is a little bit unconventional. In North America, and when you go to university, you can't actually start doing law school as part of your undergrad
Hmm.
education. And I've always had a thing for math and sciences and, hanging out with a lot of engineers or people that turned out to be engineers. So I actually started at the University of Waterloo. I
Hmm.
joined part of their first graduating class in Mechatronics engineering.
Yeah.
And I remember, when I was actually going to school and shortly after I graduated, I always had to explain to people what it was. And it was like quite a mouthful because it was like, well, it's mechanical engineering, it's electrical engineering, it's computers engineering, it's systems design engineering. And, eventually I was like, okay, well, it's just robotics, right?
Yeah.
And years later, I no longer need to explain to people what mechatronics engineering is. And then after I finished engineering school, I worked in engineering consulting. Actually, it was a co op program. So I was
Mm.
actually working, throughout the duration of my undergrad. But I continued my studies, and I actually, as I said, came to here, London, for my first law degree. And then I went to UC Berkeley, where I
Mm.
got my master's of law. And then I got admitted to the New York bar after that. So I moved to New York. And then when I moved here to London about 3, 4 years ago, I decided that, hey, if I'm going to live here, right? So I got on the role of solicitors here. So
Mm.
in terms of that, I'm a dual qualified attorney.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, it's like probably not the common path for people to end up in then data and AI. But I find it very interesting because you bring this this technical skill set, and then this legal mindset also an experience, and then it has a lot to do with obviously business knowledge and business
hmm
models understanding, and then guiding them through the transformation. So as an advisor, so you're covering quite a lot of topics.
Well, I think it may seem kind of unconventional
Mm.
and unusual, and it certainly was the case, 20 years ago when I decided to,
Mm.
kind of make my decisions and to move forward one step at a time. But for me, the
Mm.
path had always been clear. I've
Mm.
had the privilege of, working alongside CEOs and company founders since I was quite young,
Mm.
right? Maybe it was a smaller company, but the challenges that come with the company, is just the same. And working with C-level executives and founders, they are very sensitive to the fact that they need to actually solve the problem, because it's not about carving out a problem, their own KPI, and then maybe making it another chief's problem, or kind of playing problem
Mm.
whack-a-mole, right? Or, in data governance, we talk about kind of data whack-a-mole. It comes up here, you whack it, it comes back down elsewhere. As founders and CEOs, they don't have that privilege, right?
Mm.
And so what I saw alongside is that it's important to understand how things work, and that's where my engineering background comes in,
Mm.
right? And we're in the context of society, and there's the rules, and there's regulations and all of that. So that's the legal aspect of it. And
Mm.
of course, with businesses, there's the business language, and that's why for a while I actually was in mid-market investment banking, so I understand
Mm.
from that perspective, okay, well, what is driving a deal, what are people looking for, and things like that.
Mm.
So if you look at it from a business perspective, where business problems don't happen in a vacuum, like,
Mm.
it really, for me at least, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does totally make a lot of sense, and I can see the benefits of it also, allowing you then to address uh, different expectations. And what I would, I mean, we jump now very straight into already the different stages, but what I was noticing is when I looked into your vita was that you are very much about responsible, human-centered build-up of capabilities and understanding of then data capabilities or the usage of AI and how it should be kind of nurtured and established in an organization. So um, in that sense, I can see why these different experiences, degrees, uh, can actually be very handy, yeah, in engaging them with different C levels, yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, because I've worked with startups, like, scale ups and
Yeah.
all the way to really, really large companies, you see a lot of it, and people are, maybe they have different approaches, maybe
Mm.
there are different stages of their journey, but at the end of the
Mm.
day, it's that
Mm.
resonance with people and the human centric approach, right? That's very important. And
Mm.
as you said, right, because I've seen such a range, like every day I apply pretty much everything I know and bring my whole self to
Yeah.
the problem, right?
Yeah, and it's not only I would say, the subject matter expertise that you bring. It's also that you worked in North America, you worked in the UK, also mainland Europe, and you also worked or had your experience in the Middle East. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
cultural intelligence, I would say, that is also part of your skill set and your personality. That is very fascinating, I must say. I mean, obviously, you also bring in the Hong Kong cultural background, but like also working in all of this region. Um, how was that for you? I mean, it's again like not many people have been that much exposed to
hmm
such a global environment in their professional life.
Um, I think for me, it was something that I intentionally
Mm,
went and sought after, particularly when I was younger.
mm,
Obviously, there's the family background of being born in Hong Kong and then,
mm,
growing up in Canada and maybe some of the study choices abroad. But in terms of working, I think you and I we see this every single day, right?
yeah.
With organizations now, rarely do they operate only in one jurisdiction, right, or one location, whether it's their customers or part of their teams, vendors, somewhere along the supply chain, right? And when we are looking at something like data and AI, which really cuts across the organization, there are enough things that people could focus on the differences, right? It's important to find something to bring people together.
Mm,
And I think that my experience working across different cultures really help because, you know, one of I think my superpowers is to help people kind of look beyond the differences and come together as just humans, right?
mm, mm. Yeah, very true. And it's at the end, it's very much about the human and their expectations and meeting them where they are,
Yeah.
understanding what is driving them or concerning them in a way. And something that I would like to also cover,
hmm
because is it's not only that you had these different stages, you're also engaging as a member of the Big Data London Steering Committee, and you're also part of the Data QG Advisory Board.
Yep.
So that's again another angle that you bring to the topic, because it's it's one thing to be uh, pragmatic and hands-on
hmm
in organizations dealing with these topics, but having these advisory roles also, or being part of these committees and so on, how is that also shaping your understanding and your experience of how to deal with these topics? Yeah.
So I think this goes back to something about my consulting background, right?
Yeah.
I've spent a good amount of my career in consulting in one way or
Yeah.
another. And I still remember those days when I was like, leading relatively large engagements and training a lot
Mm,
of new consultants, right? When they first come out of school, their first job is, kind of joining this firm,
mm,
and I'll be helping them along and they would be contributing to the project. One thing that I always say is, each person brings a voice and each person brings a very unique perspective,
mm,
and they offer unique value to the project. It's not just, the managing director, the director,
mm,
which offers like, kind of thought leadership and so on and so forth, but as a person who's there clicking away at it, staring at the thing, 3 a.m. in the morning
mm,
every single day in the trenches, there's something that that person will see that nobody else will see,
mm,
right? And so kind of recognizing that it's not just about kind of climbing the corporate ladder,
mm,
but that each role along the ladder brings a unique perspective,
mm,
right?
mm.
So I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does make a huge difference, as you said, like taking the time also to engage then with the data and I community and professionals, especially when they're in their early years or making their first experiences. Uh, that's very praiseworthy that you like to share here your experience and what you have noticed. And and I have to ask here also, because you said you were like quite heavily in the industry and doing a lot of years of consulting. So was it? But you then shifted into becoming an independent, self-employed advisor and doing consultancy in that sense. So what was prompting that decision, and how did your different roles, such as being part of the steering committees, did they had something to do with that? Also, like this knowledge transition or knowledge exchange that you wanted to have?
So again, looking back at my experience,
Yeah.
like I've been very privileged to be offered many different roles, right? Kind of different functions, and kind of looking at being an independent in the sense, this is definitely not my first time being an independent advisor. And I think a lot of times is kind of taking where opportunities takes me, right? What is interesting right now. So I've been an independent in the past. I've worked on like, larger engagements as part of a firm before. And, I've led internal or been a staff member and led kind of global transformation before. So I think a lot of it is what is it that is suitable for me at that point in time for my personal life, what makes sense in the market, and what types of projects are available. But one thing that I am loving about being an independent advisor right now is our space is changing really, really fast. And I know that a lot of leaders who are in corporate roles are struggling, right? Because I've been there, right? Where you're there, you're looking at your transformation, and you're wondering what is going on outside of your organization. Either is this happening to everybody or is it just me? Being that sounding board and helping shape that vision, right? Which in turn will trickle down into kind of various corporate strategies and shaping careers of people who are newer to the industry, right? So, a lot of things that I share with leaders is yes, it's important for us to kind of work on this strategic initiative. There's still many things that we need to figure out, but enablement is something that we know we need to do and it's something that we can start now, right? So sharing messages like that and influencing decisions is something that I find very meaningful right now.
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, you actually mentioning all the topics, or what drove me also to become an independent in that sense. So it resonates a lot. Yeah, and I can see why you're doing that, and yeah, it's fascinating. And I must say, like, I don't know how it is for you. So as you said, there's a lot of change going on, especially now with having AI mentioned everywhere. And as you said, like companies maybe find it a bit challenging to understand what is really a hype, what is really a trend, and what is, even if it's a trend and it's like a lot of companies adapting to it, what is the right level of AI capabilities for our organization. So, in that sense, again, the question to you, um, being part of now, for example, Big Data London, the committee and so on, does that also allow you to broaden your understanding and to see really, okay, this is just another topic that they're gonna squeeze out from a cash perspective, but it's not really something that will remain. Is like,
Well, I think here's the thing, right?
yeah,
And this is the beautiful part of being a part of communities is
yes,
that you give to the community, but the community also teaches you. So
yeah,
it is definitely an exchange, and I have benefited a lot from being parts of community like Big Data London,
mm,
like Data QG.
mm,
So yeah, I would definitely say that there's an exchange, but
Mm.
something that I do want to kind of, maybe get to right now is, so I think this is where my kind of
Mm.
yoga philosophy and meditation kind of teaching background
Yeah.
really comes in. I think a lot of it comes down to awareness.
Mm.
Um, is this a trend? Is this right for us? I think that this is something that I've observed over the years.
Mm.
And a lot of leaders are in very, very stressful
Mm.
situations each day.
Mm.
There could be, kind of revenue pressure, profit pressure, pressure from the
Mm.
board, pressure from investors, pressure from employees, wondering if this is a company that is worth their time. A lot of pressure is going on, right?
Mm.
But in this high pressure environment, leaders are being asked to make a decision. What is right for the company becomes $1 million question. And of course, we don't want to be, super out of line in the market and go for something
Mm.
that's really, really crazy. Or, in a sense, it's okay to go really, really crazy, but knowing that we are doing it and we're making deliberate choices. But what is the baseline, right? What is it that keeps us grounded? And I think this is something that I learned in yoga is the awareness, right?
Mm.
We go back to our breath in meditation,
Mm.
we observe that, we slow things right down. And the same thing is true with organizations. And, data and AI is not the only thing that's changing for organizations today.
Yeah.
We are, of course, in the data and AI space, so we talk about, data and AI every single day. We live in and breathe it. But if you're an executive managing a company right now, there are
Mm.
geopolitical risk. There's a lot of different aspects, right,
Yeah.
that could be causing a headache today, right? And when it comes to what should we do, I
Mm.
think a lot of it comes down to having awareness
Mm.
of the business. Where am I today? What do I know to be true?
Mm.
What is it that I think it's true, but it probably isn't, that I should
Mm.
revisit? What is it that I have absolutely no idea? And I think with that awareness, right, you make informed decisions because it is ultimately about where would you like to go for your organization and how quickly it works for you, right? Kind of going back to our very initial river analogy, right?
Yes.
Is the idea of, well, how does your journey look
Mm.
like, right?
Mm.
And of course, like, I'm not saying ignoring the market, ignoring the competitors is
Mm.
important, to look left and look right and not get left behind. But, I also see that the perception of getting left behind
Mm.
have caused a lot of people to make rash decisions that, have costed people their companies.
Mm. Yeah, I like very much what you were sharing with us, and how you bring in the yoga philosophy and methodology into the picture. I will definitely ask you more about yoga,
Okay.
so no worries. We will go to that section. But I like also that you are kind of taking a little bit the rollers of slowing down a little bit, maybe the speed that is approaching organizations, and they try to kind of align with the speed that is pulling them maybe into certain directions. So when we prepared for our conversation, we said like what were good topics and how should we approach this, and we said like organizations and the risk of being maybe in a tunnel and having this different lenses.
Mhm.
There should be definitely something that we should talk to. So I like how you kind of shifted now from now into this direction, so it makes my life much easier. So uh, as you said, yeah, so the tech part is one thing, and as you said, there's like other dimensions that companies need to consider
Mhm.
for any development or transformational timeline that they have in mind. So when you deal with these different companies, and as I said, you're working basically across the entire globe, um, and your experience in that sense. Where do you see the biggest blind spots of companies when it comes to governance and risk? So when they try to define their transformation timeline or the roadmap, what they want to cover. So is there any kind of pattern that you see um, in in a way that there are blind spots that organization kind of have basically quite often, yeah?
Um, so recently I was on a panel with various experts. They call AI experts, and we were talking about metrics, right?
Mm,
Um, I think the question was, what is a metric that we could use to
mm-hmm,
measure how well we're doing when it comes to AI governance? And I think that there were a lot of very thoughtful answers by my fellow panelists.
mm-hmm,
And I, wanted to poke at it a little bit. And I was like, well, for me, perhaps it's not necessarily
mm,
about a metric. Like, do we really need another dashboard? Like, come on.
mm.
In my opinion, not really. Again, dashboard
Yeah,
has its use,
yeah.
but there's also the tendency for people to narrowly focus,
Mm,
right? And I've talked to, many C-level executives where they're like, well, it used to be that I'm hired for who I
mm,
am to
mm,
deliver to the company. Now, in my organization, they're so focused
mm,
on the three key metric, right?
mm,
And that's it, right?
mhm,
And pretty much we're all running towards that. And there's
mm,
a little bit of the tunnel vision. And going back to the AI governance thing, I was like, well, maybe instead of there's a time and place for metrics, like don't get me wrong.
yeah.
But I think for a lot of organizations, I would say, well, why are you doing things like AI governance? If you're the reason why you're doing AI governance is because you have to,
Mhm,
because there's a fine attached to it, and that's your reason,
mm,
then perhaps that would indicate, like, I'm glad you're doing it. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you're doing it, but that would indicate how successful, right, you're likely to be with that effort, right? But
mm,
if you tell me that if you go out and survey the company and people can say, okay, the reason why we are doing AI governance is because it's the right thing to do, right? Because it helps with responsible deployment of this technology. It helps keeps us safe, right?
mm,
Using that as a metric,
mhm,
and an organization, they may be at a nascent stage now, but if there are more people believing in the latter within the organization than the former,
mm,
I can tell that they have a much better chance of going further with this, right?
mhm,
And I think kind of going back
mm.
to your question, that would be a blind spot, right? It's
Okay.
the why. I think
Mhm,
what we're doing is important
yeah.
because it is important to have the guardrails in place,
Mm,
but the why makes a huge difference.
mm,
And that's the blind spot, right?
mm,
And I think there's also the definition of what is AI governance, right? And if you ask 10 people out there, you can get 10 different
mm,
definitions. The one that I like to use is that
mhm,
it's a balancing act, right? On one end, you have being able to deploy AI responsibly. And then on the other end, it is about managing kind of AI risk. And if you look at it from this perspective, then
mm,
automatically AI governance extends far beyond AI compliance.
mm,
And keep this in mind, right? Because a lot of times we are having short conversations. Things are happening at such a pace, right?
mm,
We need a shorthand. But not every jurisdiction actually has like AI specific regulations.
mm,
So I joke about this. I'm like, well, you don't have an AI regulation in your specific jurisdiction.
mm,
Does that mean that like you don't have to follow any laws? Does that mean you can go discriminate and break your employment
mm,
law, for example? Or maybe you're in a jurisdiction where there is AI specific legislation.
Mm,
Great, I didn't break that law, but like, let's go break
mm,
something else. I'm like, well, guys, recognize that there's a relationship between
mm,
things
mm,
and that things are connected and there's a genuine impact to what we're delivering, right? So
mm.
focus on the impact. So I think it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, you shared a lot of, I think, gems here and great insights. Yeah, I fully agree, obviously, with the bigger question, which is why do we need it, and in what kind of setup do we need it? And I like what you said with the your restriction that if there is no AI regulation in place, so does it mean that you have like a free pass and you can just do what you want, or is it maybe the opposite because the if you try to engage and obviously you create then certain procedures even without regulatory requirements, you will have then a kind of operating model or a governance setup which is maybe more let's say liberal in a way, but once the regulatory bodies come and they tell you, oh, now we want to have you to have certain guardrails in place, then you have to adapt to that. Yeah. So your way of dealing with that, which you might have thought is more maybe open and then giving you more freedom, is now kind of shifting to again maybe something that is a bit more regulated at the end. Yeah. So maybe let me ask you here again because of you have such a long time of experience to different regulatory requirements and regional boundaries of them. Do you see differences when it comes to regional engagement in the topic of AI adaptation and transforming companies with also the help of AI? Not only AI, I would say per se, but in general. Do you see there differences in how, for example, North America is dealing with it, UK, Europe, the Middle East?
Well, I think that's a great question. And this kind of brings me back to the days when I just finished engineering school and
Yeah.
I went to law school, right? So at engineering school, like, very customary that we would bring a calculator in to write a lot of our exams. And then, of course, there's no such need in writing law school exams,
Yeah.
like for the most part, right? And it's a shift in thinking.
Mm,
And in engineering school, a lot of times, like, we would have long form questions or calculations, which
mm,
leads to an answer, right?
mm,
And then I remember talking to one of my law professors here, and, the long and the short of it is there isn't that kind of a black and white
mm,
when it comes to law. It is a social science, right? And that's why, depending on where you kind of are in the world, the line kind of shifts.
mm,
And the approach is also different. Like, some places are more pro commerce,
mm,
other places perhaps are more focused on protecting rights.
mm,
And I think a lot of it is the way that the group of humans in that jurisdiction a lot of times
mm,
choose to live, right? And I think the same thing happens with AI. Is
mm,
first of all is what is the definition of AI, right?
mm, mm,
What are you using AI for? And then the perceived impact, the perceived risk benefit, right? And there's also in different societies, you are going to see that
mm,
people have different relationships with the law, right? Some jurisdiction is very much, I'm going to tell you specifically what you cannot do,
mm,
right?
mm,
Other jurisdictions are very much, okay, this is the theme. This is what
mm,
we're, the types of behaviors we would like to
mm,
encourage, right?
mm,
So if you look at kind of a lot of the things that kind of go into it and recognize that law is, in a
mm,
sense, a social science, naturally, I think you would see differences.
mm,
And on top of that, like, there's also interpretations of it.
Mm.
There's also enforcement. And so I think we're still very, very early on in that journey. But one thing that I do want to point out is that when the GDPR came out in Europe, it pretty much, people in the legal community talked about kind of the, Brussels effect, right? Because
Mm.
depending on, like, I would say for the most of the companies, right, with global footprint or not, they would use GDPR as their backbone for their data privacy programs, and then they may make regional adjustments or whatever it is. And when the EU AI Act, part of it came into force, a lot of people were asking similar questions. Would it be Brussels effects 2.0? Like,
Mm.
would it de facto become kind of the backbone of all AI governance programs and, with minor changes, for example?
Mm.
And from where I'm sitting and, what I'm seeing is that I don't necessarily feel like it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the nature of it is very different, right? One of them is governing a right? The other one, you're kind of looking at it as piece of technology, right?
Mm.
And there's also different interpretations. There's a lot of things. So I don't think it's going to be straightforward. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that things are in that space is very interesting and changing every single day.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's a very long way to say that I think at the end of the day, that's why it's important to keep humans in the center of it because our relationship with this technology, our relationship with each other, a
Mm.
lot of it will impact
Mm.
how we manage this change and how we see this change through.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of facets to what you just shared with us, and I'm wondering a little bit because I like how you kind of shared the different philosophies of how regulations are regionally different defined as maybe this is what you're not allowed to do, this is the area in which you can think and act, yeah, and I like that, but I'm asking myself like now going a little bit back in time when there was the big .com bubble and hype and everything, and now we have AI in any kind of possible way as a big theme, whether it is chatbots, AI agents, and Gen AI in general, and so on. Um, and I mean, like, not only from a business perspective or B2B perspective, also B2C perspective. Um, I'm wondering a little bit if governance is here a compass or should be defined, AI governance. And I would also like here maybe there to another aspect to the question that I'm going to ask is when we talk about AI governance, how much based on your experience we have also here to consider data governance. Yeah, so that would be one part of the question, and but the bigger question here is for me, is governance here a compass for you, like based on your experience, also with what you just shared with how GDPR, even though you said it's a different topic, but your experience in general, how companies and let's say the consumers are adapting to such big changes. Should governance be here a compass, or is it are these blinders? Yeah, in a way. What is your take? Yeah, how should we, or how do you basically try to kind of address it to the organizations that you're dealing with?
I think for me personally, I see governance as an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is not necessarily the view that's shared by everyone,
Yeah.
and there are people that believe that governance inhibit innovation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think governance is just one of those words where I think a lot of us have certain connotations when it comes to, what does governance really mean?
Mm-hmm.
And going back to our conversation earlier, use a very good term, which is operating model, right?
Mm, mm,
So whenever you have a business, or, not just a business, like in life, right?
mm,
We often sit here and talk about freedom and things like
mm,
that, but yet, there are certain ground rules,
mm,
right, that
mm,
goes on. There is an operating model, and there's stuff that helps keeps us grounded and sane,
mm,
right?
mm,
And if you look at, governance as guardrails, as part of your operating model, as something that helps you and enables you to innovate, I think that's where it is, right?
mhm,
And that's why for me, I come from a very diverse background,
mhm,
but in many ways, like when I work with my clients,
mm,
I'm their business advisor, right?
mm,
Is how do you work with data, AI, data
mm,
governance, AI governance in a way that helps with their business, right?
mm,
And I'm not a believer that they're data activities or AI activities. I
mm,
believe that they're all business activities,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Because if we're doing data activities for the sake of that they're data activities and offering no business value,
Yeah.
then that could be very challenging.
Mm,
Now, that should be distinguished from, are we able to highlight this economic value in a metric, right?
mhm,
That's a completely different story,
mm,
but this is not a hobby or a pet project by any means, right? So I think looking at it, I look at it as, are we putting in enough guardrails or enabler to help us, guide us to move forward in our strategic direction while minimizing and mitigating risk?
mm,
That's kind of how I would look at it. And
mhm,
if you look at it in that sense, I think that people will be less taken aback by, oh, we have governance.
mm,
And it's almost the idea of, if I say, no, you can't have that candy, it just makes it so much, you want it so much more. It's like,
mhm,
I want it now.
mhm, mhm,
But it's like, well, but if I give you all the candy in the world and you eat it all, well,
mm,
chances are you don't want to eat it all anyways,
mm,
right?
mm,
So I'm just saying, hey, maybe like,
mm.
5 lollipops a day, sort of a thing. Like, it really wouldn't impact you for the most part.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, because most people aren't kind of going at it at that extreme. So I think there's a lot of it is that
yeah,
psychology as well.
yeah.
And I think with working with organizations, and it's something that I'm sure you know very
Mm,
well, is about meeting them where they are and recognizing
mm,
where there could be blind spots in their existing way of thinking,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And I like to say that with people generally, I would say I've been in consulting for a good number of years, worked for a
mm,
lot of people, but rarely is somebody's mental model completely inaccurate, right?
mm,
It's just usually maybe like there's a hole here, there's a blind spot over there, and it's to help them
mm,
recognize those things
mm,
and to see the world differently,
mm,
right? And once they see the world differently, they could choose to go back to the same thing
mhm.
just because that's their choice, and they're,
Yeah.
by all means, they're free to choose whatever they want.
Mm,
But it's, helping them see that and meeting them where they are,
mm.
right? And that's kind of how you help them move along the journey, if you would.
Okay. Yeah. To add to what you just said, I really think it's just beautiful how you explain it. And to bring maybe another aspect in. And the question is that also a common kind of blind spot that you see? Yeah. Is the topic of transformation as a project. Yeah. Which is I mean, sharing now my own experiences. We want to go to these organizations, and they have maybe already obviously did a little bit of research by themselves and have something in mind that they would like to address. And it's whether it's they want to be called more data driven, more data informed, or data centric, whatever it is. Yeah. Or nowadays it's AI first, which I hear quite often. Yeah. And then I said, and I'm listening to what they have to explain and everything. And what I notice is like they treat this transformation as a kind of project. Yeah. So, and a project per se has a time horizon, an end date. And am I asking always myself then, do they know that what they try to establish, yeah, like these guardrails that you mentioned, these capabilities and so on, it's actually a kind of continuous activity. So my question to you is now, do you also see this maybe as a blind spot that a lot of organizations or decision maker have the impression that, oh, we bring in, now I say it very blunt, no, we bring in AI by this date, yeah, and Division 2027 tells us there's the end date, and then we are AI ready, rather than considering maybe as a condition. What is your take on this?
I think that's a very good question and a very complex question. I wouldn't necessarily say that is a blind spot. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is a challenge that a lot of us recognize.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also existing incentive structures which is causing decisions to be run a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, budgeting cycles, like
Mm-hmm.
you and I both know that is a real thing, right? Um, at some point in time, you need to report to investors.
Yeah.
You need to show your ROI. That's a real thing, right? And it's funny in a sense where, and I sidetrack a little bit, I speak to a lot of people, and sometimes people are like, a truly agile organization, right? And I think part of it is, are we aiming for a specific term,
Mm-hmm.
or are we aiming for an approach to do something,
Mm-hmm.
right? What is it that we're more focused on, form or substance, right? And sometimes it is important for us to recognize that there are other constraints outside of the technical work that we're doing. For example, your quarterly reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put things on a backlog, you can, work agile to a certain extent until your quarterly filing or your year end filing, and you have to explain to people that are, who've invested in a company, for example, where are we at, right? And these things can exist simultaneously, but it's about recognizing that there are different approaches and different ways of thinking, or different lenses at the same thing, right? And understanding what each lens offers as benefits and what are the limitations. Like, I think that is one of those things to kind of look at. And in terms of the project and change, I think that there, we have to be respectful for the way most companies are running now in
Yeah.
terms of the constraint, the way incentives is set up, and so on and so forth, right? Because a lot of executives, as I said now, or said previously, is that they're under a lot of constraints and they're under a lot of pressure. And many of them have very tight KPIs tied to their job, not just their bonuses, but, their continuous existence in the company, right? So, is it realistic in many senses to say, hey, we have as long as it takes to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. But also setting arbitrary kind of
Mm-hmm.
benchmarks or arbitrary kind of stick and say, by this date we will be, and after this date we don't care,
Mm-hmm.
or after this date we are in the new utopia, is also unrealistic, right? So I think part of this is about finding that middle ground that represents reality. So, a way I look at it, right? Taxes, death are certainty in life, and as with changes.
Yeah.
So maybe the thing to do instead of thinking of it as a transformation is setting and looking at it as an evolution. But with an evolution, you do need to be like, okay, well, this is the current state, this is the next targeting state,
Yeah.
right? But the difference in that project thinking versus, kind of the longer term continuous evolution thinking
Mm-hmm.
is that you don't get fooled by thinking that, okay, well, at this stage, we have made it and we don't have to change anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because change is continuous. So,
Yeah, you just proved my point why I choose the humble river and the analogy.
great one.
Yeah. uh, I like very much what you say with the evolution, because I think most companies think in still like this habit of running the business and or changing the business. So it's always like this either or. And what you are basically saying is, uh, it's not just running the business or changing; it's running the business and
Yeah.
changing the business. So that's the evolution probably that you have in mind here, or this is at least what I'm kind of taking out from what you're saying is that transformation is rather a condition, or it's like an endless theme at least, and you need to kind of understand that you have a running business, yes, and and simultaneously you always have to kind of adapt to changes, whether internal or external, and yeah, on quarterly basis maybe you have your reports to do, but then there's like on the horizon there's a bigger regulatory requirement such as CSRD, which is also very much telling organizations in Europe at least how they have to report with certain KPIs when it comes to social or governmental or environmental performances in a way, or conditions that they have within their organization. So I like that very much what you say with this evolution, and it's not either or. It's an end at the end. Yeah. And so, what would you say are actually good habits? Yeah. Um, in thinking and in behavior that companies should have in that sense for addressing these continuous transformation habit.
I think that's a very, very good question, right? And it is not necessarily specific habits,
Mm-hmm.
but it goes back to something that we've already talked about, which is awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It starts with the awareness of do you know
Mm-hmm.
um, where you are stronger
Yeah.
and maybe where you need a little bit of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the challenges for organizations, and it's not just for organizations, it's for our own lives as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Many of us were growing, we're changing, we're looking to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're doing this, the challenge usually comes down to if you are, let's say, using business terms, right? You have your BAU,
Mm-hmm.
right? Running parallel to your change, right? It's not necessarily two parallel tracks that don't cross, but in many ways, from a thinking perspective,
Mm-hmm.
the assumptions, what goes into it,
Mm-hmm.
are not necessarily the same. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them are conflicting, right, as you move forward. And I think instead of saying as a best practice, maybe as a mental hygiene, is to, accept and hold in your mind two conflicting or quote unquote conflicting thoughts and reality at the same time, right? And it comes down to the idea of kind of what got you here won't get you to the next stage idea.
Yeah.
Is how do you stay grounded while working towards or preparing for a different reality
Mm-hmm.
or slightly shifted reality, if you would, right? So I think that makes a huge difference
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to change. But it's extremely hard because, like, well, because a lot of people will be like, well, if this is true, that other thing can't be true. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is in life, it rarely is flip the switch over.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it is proportion, right? Maybe it's 90% bucket A right now, say 90% that your profit is coming from bucket A and 10% in bucket B. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, bucket A may not exist and you might be in bucket D and E, right? But it's hard for companies and for executives to, or many of them, to justify that, okay, well, bucket A is going to kind of slowly come down while B is going to come up, right? And as you kind of move forward within the company, it's not like, okay, well, it's A or B, it's some balance thereof. And how do you find that balance is extremely difficult. And again, something that I've mentioned in other interviews and talks is the idea of balancing is a dynamic act, right? And the example that I give is when you are doing a very simple balancing pose in yoga, or it doesn't even have to be yoga. Try to stand on one foot, right? If you aren't fixating your gaze at a point far away, a soft gaze far away, it's very easy to fall off. If your body isn't aligned, right, as in mechanically aligned, kind of stacking joints on top of each other, you tend to fall off. The minute that you feel like you've got your balance, right, and you like start watering your mind or whatever, you relax your muscle, you fall off. So even the very simple act of standing on one foot, if you think about it as a balancing act, is quite dynamic in nature. And why would it be any different for a business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you address it with the metaphor of yoga. It's really nice, the one body, and to keep that metaphor alive. My final question to that segment is: we see a lot of companies bring in chief transformation officers, chief digital transformation officers, and I'm wondering, as you and I agree on, that transformation is more a habit, it's more a mindset, it's something that has to be kind of uh, the guiding path or the guiding spirit of the entire body. How does it then suit that companies bring in a dedicated role, which then is kind of responsible or accountable for the transformation? Whereas we both agree that the entire body should actually transform. Yeah. So my question here is: do you think that a chief, whatever kind of transformation officer, is a role that we should still kind of promote? Or is it actually maybe a bit, again, here, hindering then organization on mid to long term to then understand, no, the entire body has to uh, understand that transformation is for all of us and not just one entity that is maybe talking about it and pushing for it?
I think it depends on the organization. For some organizations, it can be actually quite beneficial because let's say if the current culture of the organization is that an initiative is led by a chief, fill in title there, people are seeing resources head in that specific direction, right? That could be very useful to have a chief transformation officer. And again, it depends on what roles and responsibility the person has and what expectations. If the expectation is that only the transformation office will change and everybody will do exactly as they were doing
Yeah.
before, that's different than saying that, okay, our expectation is that there's now a tone from the top that we're going to lead by example, and the additional workload needs to be picked up by different people, right? And I think there's also another aspect of it, which is duration, right? Are we expecting this person to come in for a specific part of the journey, right? Or the expectation is we now have a new institution called Tree Transformation Office, where it's now part of our BAU doing things the way everybody else was doing it prior to the person joining, but we now have one more office doing it. Now, from the smile on your face and the way I've described it,
Yeah.
we see a range, right?
Yeah.
And so it depends on the organization,
Yeah.
it depends on the individual, and it kind of depends on
Mhm.
a lot of different things. But I think for certain organizations, it could be very beneficial because maybe the organization was in a relatively stable environment where most existing employees are very, very good at the existing operating model, very good at BAU, but internally they may have lacked the experience, right, for change. And they bring in external experience to help for a specific duration, working with the organization, meeting them where they are, and so on. So, again, it could be beneficial, but I've also seen it end in a disaster. So,
Okay.
depends.
Yeah, it depends. Obviously, I agree. I just think like that. Speaking on the reality that I sometimes see, not everywhere, but what I see is that it's also like the mindset then of others within the organization that okay, there's one entity or one C X whatever who is kind of now accountable for that topic. Let's see what he or she is bringing into the table or bringing to the conversation, and then we will see if we're gonna adjust or not. But till then, we just do whatever operation we were still going on with. We will just keep going the old way or the way that we do things. So in that sense, yes, I agree that it depends. Um, but it's as you said, change is very difficult, especially if you have like a company with some kind of legacy, and then if they are also spread across regions and the globe and so on. So how do you address it then at the end, like overall and so on? So we will discuss that more in
Okay.
depth in the third part of our
Okay.
conversation, because now we're going to play a game.
Okay.
Yeah. So I asked you about your hobbies, and you gave me a few of your hobbies.
Yeah.
They were, I mean, traveling, Japanese tea tradition. So there were a few things that I really liked, all of them. But I'm glad that I took the one that you already kind of mentioned here and there, which is yoga.
Okay.
Okay, so we a little bit adjust now here the studio, let's say that way, and then we're gonna play a little bit of a game, a yoga
Okay.
game.
Interesting.
Don't worry, you don't have to move. You don't have to show us any kind of yoga positions. But let's see.
I was like, are we gonna do handstands together?
No, no, no,
Like,
no.
whoa.
No, the reason why we will not engage in any kind of yoga position is you probably would assume or expect me to join you, and I know how inflexible I am. So
Yoga is not just about flexibility, but that's a separate conversation.
that's a separate conversation. So let's adjust quickly, and then yeah, gonna play the game.
Awesome.
Okay, all right. And we play now Data Yoga Flow.
Okay. I'm ready.
That's good. Okay, Jovita, as you mentioned, you are very passionate about yoga.
Yes.
You are also a yoga instructor.
Yeah.
So you are. I had to take advantage of your expertise also in that area. So what we're gonna do is, you can see on the board,
Okay.
yeah, that there are 8 questions at the end, yeah, behind of the covers there. So you tell me which of these questions you want to go for,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Then I read out loud for the audience what is written there,
Okay.
yeah. And you ideally can mention to me what yoga pose would be, let's say, the best fitting to this scenario that we have there.
Okay.
Okay?
I will try my best.
Yeah, it's so there's no right and wrong answer. Okay? We just see what comes to your mind. Okay? And let's see how many of them we can cover. So we are not have to go for all of them. So we try to pick, or you try to pick one or the other. And if you're
Sounds
good,
great.
we can start. Okay. So tell me, which one you want to go first?
Top left.
Top left, of course. So top left is What yoga pose comes to mind when teams refuse to share data? So, data silos between departments is here. The theme.
That's a tough one because what comes to mind is the warrior pose. But, and do I need to explain more? Uh,
Well, a little bit maybe for the ones
well,
that are not familiar with.
but once I think the name of the pose says it all.
Okay.
but upon kind of giving myself a little space,
Yeah.
maybe kind of the lotus pose, right? Where you
Ah.
sit there cross-legged, kind
Uh-huh.
of eyes half closed, kind of focusing on your in and out breathing because
Mm.
you know that this is going to be a relatively long journey
Mm.
in influencing and hopefully changing some minds.
Very good. You see, I think you're doing a great job. So let's see if you get me at the end of the game as someone who will start doing yoga.
We can always just try, one lesson, right?
Exactly. Okay. So I think that was already really good. Which one you want to go next?
The one underneath it then. Let's see what
Okay.
that is.
Okay. So which pose matches an AI project that promises too much but collapses quickly? So basically, an overhyped AI pilot that fizzles out.
Um, the pose that comes to mind here is the dancer's pose. It's a pose where you kind of stand on one leg. It's very, very elegant,
Mm-hmm.
very aesthetically, visually pleasing. However, it requires a lot of skills and a lot of balance. So, very much like it looks very shiny, but there's a lot of things that kind of goes into it.
I love it. I love it. It's really good. Okay, great. So this is also poses that you instruct, yeah, basically during your classes then.
Yeah, so I mostly actually share the meditation practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I will share kind of a slow flow practice, gentle
Mm-hmm.
yoga, and I much prefer to share the yin practice where the
Mm-hmm.
poses are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of yin practice is you kind of go the opposite of our stressful day,
Mm-hmm.
and we stretch it out like the fascia
Mm-hmm.
between the muscles. So, a good
Nice.
counterbalance to the change management work that we do.
Yeah, I was just about. I just wanted to ask you, how often do you do it during the week?
Um, I think there was one time where I was a much more dedicated student and I would practice my meditation daily.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to confess, I recently just came back from travels. So I haven't been touching my practice for a while.
Okay. Okay, okay. But how long are you doing yoga in general?
Um, you mean how long have I been
Yeah.
doing it? I think I got my teacher certification, my first teacher certification back in 2016.
Okay.
That was when I really dive into the study of it more.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was just like everybody else. I would go to a yoga class here and there.
Yeah.
But in New York, I was at Pure Yoga and I
Mm-hmm.
did a 200-hour teacher training and I did meditation training afterwards and yin training afterwards. But that's when
Brilliant.
I kind of went in and be like, okay, why is the sequence set up like that?
Yeah.
And then actually went and studied the philosophy of it.
Yeah, I love it.
So
I
it's
love.
been a while.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. I must say, I love the philosophy behind it, and what it's trying to give you, the inner peace, the balance.
Hmm.
Um, Whatever happens around you, it shouldn't matter. So you get your strength and you get the vision, the clearness from your inner part, basically. So I love the philosophy in that sense, but yeah, I never really got the chance to engage in it consistently. So I have also a cousin who's also a yoga instructor,
Hmm.
and he learned actually in China, and
Wow.
he tried to also get me into it, but I was ignorant. Let's say that.
Well, but I think if it is your
Yeah,
thing, it will come and find you
yeah.
because I first actually
Yeah.
got in touch with meditation when I was in high school.
Oh,
There
okay.
was a friend of mine who was really into it,
Yeah.
and he was just trying to get me to sit there and
Yeah.
count my breath till 10.
Okay.
I couldn't do it.
Oh,
And my mind was like monkey mind. It was jumping everywhere. I couldn't
yeah.
see the point of it. And fast forward to 2016, I volunteered to, spend my own time and money
Yeah.
going for the full 200-hour training, right? So, yeah, when the time is right.
All right. When the time is right, you tell me which next question you want to go for.
Um, Top right.
Top right. Okay. So we talked about hidden duality. So what yoga pose captures this hidden duality the best? What would you say?
Hmm. I think this is a hard one.
Yeah.
The pose that comes to mind when you say duality is the mountain pose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the pose where we stand there with kind of 2 feet shoulder width apart, and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of straight back with a string. Like imagine that there's a string pulling you up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your arms out to the side like that. So it's a very, very grounded pose. And the reason why I say not so sure about the hidden duality part is
Yeah.
I think that in many ways, right, the only reason why duality feels hidden
Yeah.
is because of maybe our current cultural society,
Yeah.
right? In our way of thinking, where there's the perception
Yeah.
a lot of times of or, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where things cannot kind of exist simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look in nature, right, you have yin and yang, you
Mm-hmm.
have the sun and the moon. Duality is present,
Mm-hmm.
it is right in our faces. So it's not necessarily hidden, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think for me, mountain pose comes to mind because it's very much a very grounding kind of a pose.
Oh, we definitely have to do this again.
Okay.
Okay. Next one.
The one underneath that.
Okay. Okay. Then, what pose embodies a strong, reliable foundation for governance? So, a well designed governance framework.
Hmm.
Maybe this is the mountain pose.
Very much the mountain pose, I think, will
Mm.
be suitable
Yeah.
here as well.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also another pose that comes
Mm-hmm.
to mind, which is the corpse pose, Shavasana, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
is the pose that at the end of the yoga practice, we usually kind of lie flat, supported by the ground,
Mm-hmm.
relaxed, and where we capture the benefits
Mm-hmm.
of all the hard work that we did during class and during that sequence, right? And the reason why that Shavasana also comes to mind with that is, although governance is something that we need to continuously,
Mm-hmm.
work on. It's not a checklist. It's not something that we do and forget. We also need to keep in mind that it's not about doing the work,
Mm-hmm.
but it's about reaping the benefits of governance.
Mm-hmm.
It is about being supported while supporting
Mm-hmm.
innovation, right? So I think Shavasana might be a good and important pose, just like foundation for governance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I let that.
We'll let the energy.
Exactly. I try to feel the energy of what you're sharing with us. Okay. You're good for one last one. I mean, I would love to go for all eight, but keeping the time a little bit
Okay, let's
in
do one
perspective.
more.
One more? Okay. Now, which one should it be?
Um, let's do bottom right.
Bottom right. This one here.
Yep.
Okay, which pose reflects the quiet strength of catalysts?
Mm.
Catalyst communities driving data change from within.
I think it's the pose where we have 2 feet firmly planted
Mm-hmm.
on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
where it's shoulder width apart, and we have our hands together like this,
Mm-hmm.
and our eyes closed.
Okay, I'm doing it with you.
So I think that reflects the quiet strength of Catalyst
Mm-hmm.
because it really requires us to turn inward,
Mm-hmm.
become very, very aware, be connected to our ground,
Mm-hmm.
also feel the energy of ourselves being pulled along,
Mm-hmm.
and where we turn into our hearts. Because at the end of the day, I
Mm-hmm.
do think that the strength of Catalyst in many organizations when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to change lies in the people.
You know, like I actually, whenever you talk, I finish your answers. I don't want to add anything. I don't want to ruin anything. So I would just leave it like this. I would just say there was a lot of, that was not only fun, that was very inspirational.
Thank you.
I like the messages that you get out. Uh, and I maybe a question here is, I mean, is that something that you also do when you talk to your clients? Like, is yoga something that you sometimes point out to them, and the philosophy or these kind of poses in these kind of scenarios?
I think it depends on the
Yeah,
client.
yeah,
I don't usually explicitly
yeah.
mention yoga or use yoga
Mm-hmm,
metaphors
mm-hmm,
unless there's a resonance
mm-hmm,
with the client, meaning that maybe the client is also a fellow practitioner.
mm-hmm,
But I think that the philosophy is definitely something that flows throughout life, right?
mm-hmm.
And we, again, in our earlier conversations, we talked about blind spots, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think a major blind spot that I see for organizations is that they feel like when it comes to business, um, separate rules apply.
Mm-hmm,
What all of the wisdom that we learn in life
mm-hmm,
somehow goes out the window, right?
mm-hmm,
And I see this with AI governance as well, right? If I talk to some people as one to one, a
mm-hmm,
person to a person, a human to a human, they will share with me often how much they're worried about our fast pace of ungoverned artificial intelligence.
yeah.
But as soon as they wear their executive hat,
Mm-hmm,
it would be we can deploy AI with absolutely no risk. We do not need governance.
mm-hmm,
And but that's the same individual that is concerned about their upbringing of their child, and what is that going to do in terms of impacting relationships
mm-hmm,
in societies and in their lives. So it's as if, a completely different context, right?
mm-hmm,
But just like a river
mm-hmm,
flows through
mm-hmm.
and it doesn't stop, same thing with this. Like the fabric is connected.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I don't want to add anything. I just would say thank you already for this very inspirational game part. Uh,
It was really fun and very thoughtful. Thank you for putting
oh,
it together.
my pleasure, my pleasure. I benefit the most, I think, out of it. So, uh, let's jump to the next segment,
Okay.
which we have prepared. Yeah. So the generative AI mirror. Okay, that comes next. But this was already mind blowing. Let's say that way. Now, out of the yoga session with you, at least I can feel already a difference. And let's come to the last section of our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the generative AI mirror. Yeah.
Mm.
So the lens focus. Yeah. Um, and let me ask you here, already maybe a kind of tricky question, but do you see generative AI as a mirror that simply reflects what's already there? or more like a forcing function that pushes organizations to re invent themselves?
Um, I think it depends
Mm-hmm.
on what organizations are choosing to use generative AI for, right? I think again, we've talked about this where generative AI is a horizontal technology.
Mm-hmm.
It can very much be used in terms of making certain BAU things easier, increasing productivity, or there could be very innovative uses of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it works in a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on what the
Mm-hmm.
application is. And this is why I think when organizations are working with this, going back to the awareness point, going to back to the idea of being purpose focused, right? Setting your strategy is what is it that you and your organization is looking to do, right? And how could this potential technology offer you
Mm-hmm.
a way to go do it? And I think we're still in the relatively early stages when it comes to generative AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of adoption, in genuine adoption in many organizations at a production kind of a level and scale. So, in a lot of conversations now, it tends to be that the subject is generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
What can generative AI do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily what is our organization looking to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that, again, we talked about space, we talk about slowing down, and inevitably, when those times and moments come
Mm-hmm.
and people start to flip it and switch it, then I think you will have companies that either for them is a reason to be innovative,
Mm-hmm.
or for them, it would be kind of looking back and doing whatever they were doing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a different way, which may
Mm-hmm.
or may not be faster, better, or cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I like the answer, but I will now go a layer deeper.
Okay.
Okay. Because I use this mirror analogy quite often for
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to Gen AI or AI capabilities, because I like how it kind of exposes the capabilities of an organization. So where it is governance gaps
Mm-hmm.
or data and AI literacy or even leadership, um, yeah, kind of gaps or deficits when it comes to bringing in new capabilities. And I don't only mean the technical component of it. I also very much mean the, as you always highlighted throughout the session, the purpose question and how does it really help us in our business model and in our functions and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So the question that I have here is, uh, do you see in that sense a mirror holding towards the organization and exposing these kind of deficits, gaps uh, in certain areas? Is there something that you have noticed when organizations try to engage in the development or the establishment of Gen AI, and where you could say like, look, these are some gaps. If you really want to walk down the aisle,
Mm-hmm.
these are some gaps that, yeah,
Yeah.
the mirror is showing you.
So I think there might be an interpretation, a slight interpretation difference there, because
Yeah.
there's actually a book out there which talks about generative AI and
Oh.
how, because it's training on
Yeah.
existing data, is
Yeah.
a mirror, is a rear view mirror looking at the
Ah.
back,
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of an
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
But I think what you're referring to here
Yeah.
is that I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mirror, but I would say it's
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because as we know, every time organizations like invest in
Mm-hmm.
wanting to change or changing is an opportunity to improve, right? And generative AI is a very, very powerful tool where in many ways it could amplify,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're doing something well, it could potentially amplify the positive benefits. If you have a gap, now you're exposing the gap faster or you're making the gap wider, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So definitely, again, like generative AI is a technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it solves
Mm-hmm.
things like or organizational challenges
Mm-hmm.
and the like, but for you to have a successful implementation of it,
Mm-hmm.
certain gaps needs to be looked at and closed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, it's just like the analogy that we always use about building a building,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be on solid foundations.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I work with clients, it is definitely something that we'll look at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just about, okay, well, building on top of a foundation with a lot of different holes. And
Mm-hmm.
there are certain gaps that we will have to close first.
Mm-hmm.
And this sometimes is an opportunity for leaders to sit here and address issues that maybe were previously deprioritized, right?
Mm-hmm.
An example of this is data governance. Um, I've been saying this for a while now, is I have no idea in many organizations how their AI implementation effort is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I say this to data governance leaders where this is your, what I perceive as a once in a lifetime opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to get people to value more of what you are bringing to the organization, fund the initiatives that your organizations desperately, desperately need. So please take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely an opportunity to take advantage of, and but in that sense, you need to kind of have an overview uh, where you maybe have the chances now to use the momentum that is giving to
Yeah.
you. So from your daily work, let's say with your clients, so um, how do you do it? How do you handle these kind of situations? Yeah, where I mean, when you are brought into the organization, and then they 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 share with you their objectives, and then you probably try to kind of get an overview. You try to kind of assess and evaluate where they are really standing and so on. So how is that for you then, and how do you then kind of reveal to them these opportunities, as you said? So seeing these gaps and then saying to them like, hey, these gaps are real, yeah, because of this or that, maybe out of your experience, you and then you kind of tailor it to them in your conversation as opportunities. So how can we kind of imagine these conversations that you're gonna have?
Um, I think these conversations, the foundation of it is alignment
Mm-hmm.
and resonance, right? And I think this is where my diverse background, experience,
Mm-hmm.
and education comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I both know like data and AI projects are very, very challenging
Mm-hmm.
because they don't work vertical in silos. You really need a lot of different stakeholders to come
Yeah.
together because it works, horizontal across the organization.
Yeah.
And I could be talking to, 10 different executive leaders within an organization about AI governance. It could be about the exact same topic,
Mm-hmm.
but the words that I say, my metaphors, my analogy, could be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It is about getting that alignment and getting the idea across that I'm here for that executive, right? I'm here for their function. This is how their function is going to benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's the foundation for the conversation is building trust, having that alignment, and first see through the lens of the stakeholder that I'm working with. And only then can we slowly bring everybody onto the same page and on board. And that is not to say that there won't be any conflicts, because sometimes, depending on roles and functions and responsibilities, there are going to be misalignment, right? But kind of connecting one on one to make that stakeholder understand what we're doing from his or her professional expertise, perspective, and role and responsibility is the absolute necessary starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, that again resonates quite a lot.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm asking myself, like, are we dealing all with the same people? Who is teaching them? Yeah. Uh, so yeah, but maybe let me just build on this what you just shared with us. So because you said you try to build up the trust, yeah, and also then being in that sense also a little bit the guide or the compass in that sense, a little bit of telling them, hey, this is what you maybe now need to do next, and this is what you have to focus on, and so on. And as you said, it's not just a happy path at the end.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, and what what I think is then why I said, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, uh, th- you were sharing the book about the AI mirror, which is looking at it from a different perspective maybe than what we are discussing now. But what I like about this AI mirror thing, in the way I like to address it, is a bit, before it was always like, okay, I have my data experts, data professionals, and they have to do whatever they do. Yeah, just go and do. So, but now, because AI is now in everyone's mouth and everyone wants to deal with it, and you see like Copilot and these chatbots, and you see emails that you receive from C levels, and you see like, oh, okay, there's the long dash, and there's certain wording, and you can see that everyone is using it. Yeah. And the question for me is then, how much literacy is now with everyone? Because if data was then just for the professionals, and I just looked at it from a KPI perspective, as a, yeah, to make maybe better decisions and so on, but now Gen AI is actually kind of supposed to help the entire organization. So how is the literacy of the entire organization, and how is the literacy of those ones that want to, yeah, make it accessible and usable for the wider audience? So we come a lot into the direction of data and AI literacy. And so where do you start in your conversations? Let me say it that way. I mean, addressing then these kind of, hey, especially when we talk about trusting um, the prompts or the results of chatbots and so on, and the bias nature of these solutions and so on. So how do you kind of navigate yourself around these kind of literacy opportunities, as you call them?
I think for this, of course, the starting point is that resonance and alignment, right?
Yeah.
The next step then is to figure out where the person is at on the AI value chain, right? Because depending on their persona, their roles and responsibilities, and what they're already bringing into the conversation with, that gives you a starting point to have that conversation, right? And the reality is, in terms of literacy, right, what an executive may be required to do with generative AI, not just using it, but making decisions for the company, is likely going to be different than maybe an employee who's starting out their career where they've been maybe given certain access to tools within the company, being asked to get familiar with it and to use it, right? And there's also another thing, which is the geographical location of where this is happening. You mentioned that everybody is using it, and I think definitely in our circles, right, we are seeing a very wide adoption of it. But I also speak with some of my colleagues and counterparts in different countries where maybe they don't have the same level of trust, or their relationship with generative AI is different, and companies are very cautious with adopting it. For example, in some cases, companies don't want to be seen to be adopting it because that would be associated with cutting a lot of jobs. And that in certain geo regions, that would be hurting their reputation, right? That they're even considering something like that. So I think there's a lot of factors that comes into it in terms of how to have that conversation, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to figuring out what information would be most useful for that person and what they're looking to do.
Yeah, again, I think very much relatable, and everyone can see that you're speaking out of experience. We unfortunately have to come to an end.
Okay.
I hope we can continue the conversation, and
We'll definitely do
Yeah.
that. But thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is completely mine. It was really great to have you here and to engage with you and to see. I think it's not up to me to give give maybe a little bit of summary. So yeah, maybe from your side, if there's anything you want to share with the audience, maybe as a key takeaway from your perspective, if there is anything you would like to highlight. Yeah.
We had a very long conversation today.
Yes.
So I don't know if I can summarize it down to
Yeah.
one single key takeaway. But I think what our conversation have highlighted is the importance of our values, the importance of showing up, believing in what we do, the importance in managing change in a way where it's from one human to another human. I think ultimately those are maybe my key takeaways for today.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think change from one person to the other person is something very important. And I think in that sense, it's good to really look inside yourself. What is driving the need of change or the way you respond to certain environmental factors in a transformation in general? It should be something that where people should start. Yeah. So if we want to engage with others, let's try to figure out what is really driving us and what is really, in that sense, with the help of yoga, maybe, the needs or the expectations that we have. Yeah. So before I close it, one last question. You at the beginning, and I know I get you now. I have to ask you now for a spontaneous answer, but at the beginning, I was sharing a fun fact about a river and data. So we closed the session also with a fun fact about a river and data and AI. But this time, the guest has to give a metaphor or an analogy for it. So please, do you have any kind of analogy or metaphor for a river or water and data and AI?
I do.
Okay.
So this is about water, and this is, I think I read it in one of the Chinese philosophy books. I think a lot of times people would think of water as being soft, but water is actually very, very powerful. And I like this analogy because it's very similar to when we're working with change in an organization. Water can take the form of different shapes of the container. Water will flow to the bottom of the mountain into the valleys where it's most needed. Water can be very nourishing, but there's also incredible force when it comes to water. Water can come in as a wave and completely wipe you out. There's a kind of endurance and resistance that comes with water where the water flows in the river and it could erode and round out rocks. It could move mountains. So I think in terms of the characteristic of water, there's a lot of commonalities with the work that we do with data and AI change and transformation.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't followed Jovita on LinkedIn or Substack, I urge you to do it and just benefit from all the gems and beautiful analogies and experiences that she shares with everyone. So please follow her. That's my least expectation from everyone who's watching or hearing this. So it was a tremendous honor to have you, and I enjoyed the conversation, every second of it, and I hope we can repeat this. So thank you, Jovita.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and it's tremendous amount of fun. And we'll do it again.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.